Gordon Causey coming to you live again, unscripted on this now the 11th of March. We are in the early morning hours of March 11, 2025. Time right now where I am in Eastern Ontario, Southeastern Ontario, 12:52 a.m. according to the clock on my computer. This is my dog, Candy the Wonder Dog, who should have been named COVID or Corona because she came into the house on March 18th, 2020, just pretty much bang on when all the insanity set in. And uh, within months and in the 2 years that followed, we had people wearing masks while standing up but not sitting down. We had people following stickers on the floor. We had Canadian truckers valiantly going to Ottawa to uh, stand up for Canadian our the rule of law, for the right to gather. Uh, Brett Skinner is a frequent contributor to the station. He's shown up on the live chat and he's writing, "Insanity, that's an understatement. No kidding. We are in an insane situation right now, and Canada has just found out that we're going to have a new prime minister. Canadians writ large did not vote to have Mark Carney as our next prime minister. He has been imposed on Canadians by Liberal Party of Canada members, those that decided to vote. There are about 150,000 members of Canada's Liberal Party who voted for 86% of them voted to have Mark Carney installed as the leader of the Liberal Party, with Justin Trudeau slated to formally announce and resign the leadership. And when that happens, then Mark Carney will go to our Governor General, who is the King's representative in Canada. This is little understood even by Canadians, let alone my American friends. Brett is down in Wyoming. Uh, uh, Even Canadians don't understand our own parliamentary system of democracy. There are Canadians who are under the misguided illusion that you know Mark Carney doesn't get to be prime minister until he wins a general election in this country. No, what will happen in the probably within a week, Trudeau will formally resign leadership of the Liberal Party. Probably both he and Mark Carney will go to Rideau Hall, which is the residence of Canada's Governor General, who's the representative of the Crown, the King, and then he will be formally sworn in as Canada's next prime minister. And at that point, he occupies the prime minister's office. He does not have a seat in parliament, so he won't be during question period, if there ever is one. He will not be sitting in parliament. He can sit in the gallery and observe, but he doesn't have a seat in parliament. This has happened before. The last time it happened was back in the 1980s. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, he resigned the leadership of the Liberal Party, and then there was a leadership race. John Turner was selected by Liberal Party members to replace Trudeau, but John Turner did not have a seat in the House of Commons. He did earn a seat in the House of Commons by a member of the Liberal Party resigned a seat in Vancouver Quadra, and John Turner ran in a by-election and won that by-election in that seat of the riding of what was then known as Vancouver Quadra. I don't know if that riding still exists. Electoral lines get redrawn as the population expands. And so it has happened before, and it has actually happened with Mackenzie King, who is Canada's longest serving Prime Minister of Canada. On two occasions, his party, the Liberals, won government. They won the most seats in the House of Commons, but William Lyon Mackenzie King, most commonly referred to simply as Mackenzie King, he lost his seat in two elections and then later was able to enter parliament through by-elections. He got a member of his gut, a sitting member of the Liberal Party, to resign. King then went and ran in a by-election and then won and gained entry. That's history. and it doesn't have much bearing on what's going on now, just to speak to the legalities of things. So yes, Mark Carney is going to be the next prime minister of Canada. I'm here to tell you, and I'm not the only one saying this. This is a commonly held view. Mark Carney will be calling an election within, after taking that oath of office, becoming the sitting prime minister. He will then, my guess is within 2 weeks from today, he will go to the governor general once again and request that, or yes, request, ask that Canada's parliament be formally dissolved for the purposes of having a general election. So he'll never actually act in the role of prime minister. We'll be going to an election very quick. He'll have the title, he'll get his picture in our parliament buildings, regardless of the outcome of the election, which I anticipate will be held either in late April or early May. That's when I suspect Canadians will be going to the polls, marking our X's in 343 ridings across this country. But I'm here to say, in the subject line of this video, is that conservatives have their work cut out for them. And I'm here to offer some advice as to how to best go about defeating Mark Carney, fully realizing it is going to be very difficult. It's been a popular sentiment among conservative minded Canadians to think there is no way that the Liberals will win a fourth term after the damage they've done over the past 10 years. There's no way Canadians would be dumb enough to vote for Liberals again. And I'm here to tell you, never underestimate the stupidity of the voting public. Never underestimate the stupidity of Canadians. Just today, I've mentioned this many times, but I'm going to reiterate it. Some people may jump onto my station, wonder who is this guy? What does he know? He's an idiot. He's a moron. I disagree with him, so obviously he can't be very smart, because anyone who's smart only agrees with me. I did go to university. I studied political science. I served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm Canadian born. Both my parents were born here, and three of my four grandparents were born in Canada. Not that it matters, but I have deep roots in this country. With that being said, I spent myself at my youth, my very early youth, up until the age of 12 years of age. I spent close to 10 years growing up in the United States. I lived in New York, New Jersey, and Portland, Oregon on the West Coast. My father worked in the finance industry. He worked for one of the big five, is what we call them here in Canada, one of the big five Canadian banks. And so we hopscotch back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. Spent about 3 years in New York, 4.5, 5 years in New Jersey, while my dad also worked in New York. And then 1 year out in Portland, Oregon. But then in 1978, when I was turning 12, we moved back to Canada permanently. And so I've been living here the rest of the time. I like what Brett Skinner is writing, hashtag you can't fix stupid. For what it's worth, the American voting public can be dumb as a second coat of paint as well. Yeah, we Canadians and Americans can both be led around by the nose very easily by our media masters. I will say this, though, Canadians are far more compliant. Canadians are less apt to get their back up. We are more trusting, it would be the right word, I think. Trusting of government institutions, of media outlets, our lying media outlets. Brett Skinner's writing, yes, but we have the Second Amendment to fix stupid. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is the right to bear arms. In other words, then, and the reason that amendment was written in there was that the founding fathers of the American Republic recognized that governments can turn tyrannical. And so the necessity of having an armed militia who can go up against a tyrannical government is an essential right, and therefore that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. The last part of that statement is right out of the Second Amendment. I don't remember the full amendment, exactly how it's worded. It's not that long, but that's the United States. Canada, we're in a situation right now where we're going to be heading to the polls. I'm predicting late April, early May. And right now, the Liberal Party of Canada is experiencing something of a love in. They're getting 24-hour, 7-day a week coverage on the Liberal leadership race. Now, who is this Mark Carney? CBC, CTV, Global, all the newspapers, all the media outlets, all the talking heads are fixating on introducing Mark Carney to Canadians born, I think, up in the Yukon or Northwest Territories. Pictures of him playing goalie, standing in front of a hockey net, trying to solidify his Canadian bona fides, considering the fact that he spent a good chunk of his life, and certainly most recently, living in England, living in New York City. He was chairman of the board for Brookfield Property Management. This is an important point. And while he was chairman of Brookfield Property Management, that company, based in Canada, voted to move their operations, their head office, to take Canadian jobs out of Canada and to put them into Donald Trump's stomping grounds of New York City. And this is not being talked about enough. It came up during the Liberal leadership race, and Mark Carney lied and said that that decision wasn't made until December. No, that was a lie. Fact check it everywhere you want. That decision was made back in October. The reason he lied and said it was made in December is because by December he had vacated his role. He had left his role of being chairman of the board for Brookfield. What happened was the decision was made to move to the United States, down to Donald Trump's town of New York City. That decision was made in October while Mark Carney was steering the ship, so to speak. And then the decision was finally enacted after Carney left. So Carney is responsible for having sent Canadian jobs, and well-paying Canadian jobs, down to the United States, having Brookfield, property asset management company, down to the U.S., sent those jobs and the office space they leased and everything else. Ka-ching, ka-ching for the United States. Too bad, so sad for Canada. And where they're going to play things up, and the media is going to be all over Mark Carney, like, to use an old expression, like white on rice, but it's going to be very positive. He was governor of the Bank of Canada during a time sometimes called the Great Financial Crisis, sometimes called the Great Recession, or the Deep Recession. Has different monikers that have been placed on it. What happened? But did Mark Carney, and he guided Canada through that as governor of the Bank of Canada. Is it true? I'm here to tell you, no, it's not true. I can tell you exactly how it was called the subprime lending crisis. What happened in the United States is there were individuals who couldn't get a credit card. Poor credit ratings, poor credit history, low incomes, who couldn't get a mortgage. And then wanting to increase profits, the US financial industry as a whole, they brought about this scheme called subprime lending. And individuals who normally would not qualify for a mortgage loan, were granted mortgage loans at rates below prime, hence the term subprime lending crisis. Here, what's the prime rate? And I forget exactly how far below they went, a point and a half. We'll lend you money. Now what happened? You had a bunch of people flooding into the housing market all at the same time, and it had the inevitable consequence of boosting prices. However, these individuals now entering the housing market without the economic smarts to properly handle debt found out now, because they were a homeowner, now they qualified for that credit card. Now the bank was offering them a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. Now they could rack up debt, and they did. They racked up debt. However, with everyone storming into the market at the same time, housing prices kept going up. And what happened was a person would go out and buy a house. Let's say it cost $100,000. They put no money down, so they owe $100,000. Then they got a HELOC, a home equity line of credit for 10 grand, which they max out because, hey, now we can go to Florida. Now we can go to Jamaica. Now we can go to Europe. We got money and credit cards with $5,000 limits on them. And oh, let's rack that up too. And then they were like, oh my gosh, my minimum monthly payment on my credit card is higher than my weekly paycheck. And they went to the bank and said, oh my gosh, I guess you're going to have to sell our house. I guess we're going to have to. And the bank said, no, it's okay. We can now refinance you because that house you bought for $100,000 is now worth $300,000. You have $200,000 worth of equity in your home. We can refinance you and pay off your line of credit, pay off your credit cards, and we'll increase your line of credit to 20 grand now and double the limit on your credit cards. And great, now I can go down to Club Med. Wow, hallelujah. And so this is what happened. It was a house of cards waiting to fall. However, that was just the first layer. Call that the first story of a building built on quicksand. And the quicksand was strong enough to hold the building up. It was shaking a little bit, but it was holding up. And then the financial industry, these banks, they said, gosh, we got all these really crappy mortgages. These are dangerous. But we need to bundle them together. What they did is they created a financial instrument, and going off memory, I think it was called a convertible debenture unit. I seem to recall the acronym CDU. And what they did is they would take 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 of these crappy mortgages, subprime lending mortgages, and bundled them together. And they worked out a financial calculation. And it's a little convoluted to explain, but I think I can do it reasonably simply. Now, you have 1,000 mortgages, crappy mortgages bundled together. Is it conceivable that one could fail? More than conceivable. It's almost a slam dunk that one is going to fail. What about 10? What about 10? Are 10 of them going to fail? Yeah, as a matter of fact, probably. That's probably a slam dunk too. 100? Yeah, you know what? 100 of them could fail as well. 100 people could stop making their payments on their mortgage. What about 500? Half. Could half of them tank? That's possible. But then could all of them fail? Could all 1,000 mortgages, subprime mortgages, could they all fail? And that was mathematically proven to be near impossible to happen. And so what that meant is that there would always be money flowing into this convertible debenture. There would always be money coming in. And through their financial calculations, they came up with a mathematical proof that this represented a AAA investment, because there would always be money flowing into it. It was impossible for all of these 1,000 or more mortgages to all of them fail. Money would always be flowing in. Therefore, we can assign to this debenture unit, this convertible debenture, we can assign a AAA credit rating or a AAA rating on this. And now we can resell it as an investment. And when you look at pensions funds in the United States and even in Canada, we're talking about pension funds that have hundreds of billions, maybe even trillions combined of capital that need to be invested, but because they're pension funds, they're precluded from investing in anything high risk. They're looking for low risk, low return, but low risk. And so, and quite often, asset managers for pension funds, they're like, I've got money sitting here. I need to get it working, and there aren't enough AAA rated investment vehicles for me to invest in. And now the banks came to them and said, here, we've got AAA rated convertible debentures. Great. Where do I sign? And that was the next story on a house built on quicksand. Then another story was added, when now you have these investment vehicles, well, we need to insure them. We have to have insurance on them. And then the insurers would take out reinsurance. And it was all built on a house of cards because eventually the housing market, it's not going to go up forever. And once it peaked out, and these mortgage holders who had racked up debt, often in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and again, their minimum monthly payment on their MasterCard is now equal to their annual income. And they're like, I can't pay this, refinance me. And they say, well, we can't refinance you anymore. The bank, you owe more on your house than the house is worth. So then, and this is key, and it's got nothing to do with Mark Carney and the Bank of Canada. This is the Canada Bank Act, which is a piece of legislation that's enacted by Parliament, not by a private financial institution. Incidentally, the central banks, Bank of Canada, Bank of England, what they refer to as the Fed in the United States, these are not government these are not government run institutions. They are, um, it's a private enterprise. It's a private company. Ron Paul, who's a congressman in the United States of America and who ran twice for the Republican nomination, famously wanted to audit the Fed. And he got crapped all over by the CNNs, NBCs, CBSs of the world, by the mainstream media press, who are bought and paid for by big money interests. They don't want the Fed audited. They don't want to air their dirty laundry. You imagine that, the government going in to audit a central bank like the Federal Reserve Bank in the US, Bank Canada, Bank of England. These are privately held companies. Anyway, and you can verify that. Don't take my word for it, please. Mayor, I haven't seen you for a while. Hey, back. At any rate, I'm just commenting on the chat. I welcome anyone. If you want to put some messages in the chat, please do. So did Mark Carney, did he enact Canada's Bank Act? Did he change it? He did nothing with it. The reason Canada's housing market didn't collapse like in the United States is in the United States, if I have a house that I have 300,000, I owe 300,000, there's a $300,000 mortgage on my home, but the house is only worth 200,000. Well, what I could do at that point is I could go to the bank with my keys to my house and say, there, it's your problem now. You lent me $300,000 on a house that's only worth $2. It's your problem, and I can walk away because my mortgage was secured by the house. And I would just sign over the deed and say, there's the house, and walk away clean. They called it jingle mail because people were sending in the deeds, signing it over to the bank with the keys in the mail. Jingle mail, another person walking away from their debt. In Canada, because of our banking regulations, that was impossible. We have something, you're still responsible for the debt in Canada. We have what is called power of sale. What happens if you fail to pay your mortgage and you have a $300,000 mortgage on a house and the bank takes it over and it only sells for 200,000? Then the bank comes to you and says, okay, you owe us 100 grand. Well, I gave you the house. Yeah, but it wasn't enough to settle the debt. So Canadians did not have that option to just simply hand it over to the bank. And then the Harper government, Stephen Harper's conservative government, enacted legislation. What they did is they made changes to the Canada Bank Act at the time. And being a fiscal conservative, I was worried about it. I thought it could cause problems. What they did is they started to increase the years on an amortization. Standard amortization when you take out a new mortgage is 25 years. And then they extended it to 30 and then to 35. And eventually, I think it got to 40. I know it got to 35. It might have even gotten to 40. And that helped Canadians weather the storm. The one thing the central banks did was they, across the board, Canada, US, Britain, everywhere, the central banks universally lowered interest rates to make borrowing cheaper. And they engaged in quantitative easing, because what happened when that great implosion happened, I think Lehman Brothers Bank, a major investment bank in New York, based in New York City, they actually folded. They collapsed. They disappeared, and all the money that they were owed disappeared as well. And there was a concern that there isn't enough money in the marketplace. No one has any money because it's all disappeared into bad loans that are all being written off now. This is when we had the term too big to fail, and the government came in and underwrote the big banks like Morgan Stanley and Citibank and Bank of America, because this was primarily an American problem. But because the US is the world's largest economy, their economy, the US economy, is more than 10 times bigger than that of Canada's. And that caused a global financial crisis. And it impacted Canada, but we were not impacted to the same degree because of our banking regulations that are governed by the government of Canada, not by the Bank of Canada. So Mark Carney didn't have anything to do with anything with Canada weathering the storm. Stephen Harper deserves far more credit than Mark Carney ever got. The only thing that the central banks did was, in tandem all over the world, they lowered interest rates, and they also engaged in something called quantitative easing because of the lack of money supply in the marketplace. They opened the tap, and it's a bit of a marketing scheme to call it quantitative easing. The quantitative part was increasing the money supply, and the easing was the easing of restrictions, which would normally keep the money supply from expanding too fast, too quick. Well, we're easing those restrictions that restrict the flow of money into the market. We're just going to print more money, get more money into the marketplace. It's a branding statement, quantitative easing. If they said we're going to print more money, which would be a more accurate representation, well, then people would be afraid, because well, there are plenty of economists who remember what happened during the days of the Weimar Republic, which preceded wartime Germany, and is actually one of the major causes of World War II. The Weimar Republic in Germany, that was after World War One. That's the government. That was the government of Germany. And what the Weimar Republic did is they just printed more money. They actually nationalized all the printing presses in Germany, or pretty much all of them, and began to, so that they could print even more. And it got so bad that rather than print Deutschmarks on both sides, they were only printing on one side of the paper, because that way they could pretty much double production of Deutschmarks. And you had workers going into their factory, getting paid as soon as they left the job. They would get a wheelbarrow full, literally, of Deutschmarks, and would go straight to the shops and spend it right away, because the very next day prices would go up. Every day prices were going up. It's called hyperinflation. I want to read what Mayur, and I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce the last name, probably just a username anyway, but maybe it is your real name. I use my own real name. Mayor writes, most Canadians, after the shock yesterday, will realize this is an opportunity. If PP can't beat Carney, we are in big trouble. Well, I'm here to tell you we're going to have a hard time defeating Mark Carney, because I'm a pipsqueak. I'm a lone voice in the wilderness. No one's going to be listening. Well, I listen to this guy, Gordon Causey, on YouTube. Who? Oh, yeah, you're an idiot. Well, no, he had some good things to say. Yeah, you're an idiot. I listen, and they'll say, I listen to CBC News. I listen to CTV. I watch About That on CBC. I know what's going on. I watch Power and Politics on CTV. I'm informed. And they say that Mark Carney is the right guy. I saw the way, there is a guy presenting the conservative point, but it's Mark Carney. The TV told me. And we have our work cut out for us, because Mark Carney is very much an inside player. He is the choice of the establishment. He is the choice of the corporate sector. He's the guy they want running the ship of state in Canada. They like a guy who takes jobs from Canada and ships them down to the US. They like a guy who's going to hammer the shit. Pardon me for swearing. I don't typically engage in swearing, but sometimes the English language is a very poor means of communication. So why limit yourselves? Uh, Carney is proud of the fact that he's going to hammer the shit out of the steel industry in Canada by imposing carbon taxes on the producers of steel, so that rather than have good old Canadian steel being produced, we can just import it from China. China, which incidentally just hit us with 100% tariffs on agricultural products like canola oil, and read up about how Manitoba farmers are reacting to that. I was working today. I was just mentioning, a bit of my background growing up in the U.S., et cetera, studying poli sci at university, whatever. But and being in the military, I left the military in 2021 June because I was no way I was going to take that rushed, crappy, ineffective, you know what. So I got out of the military, and now I work in a retail establishment, and I spend a lot of time dealing with the public. And there was a gentleman I interacted with just today or yesterday, and it would have been today. He had a hat on, one of those Canada not for sale hats. And so I asked him, I said, can I say, I'm just curious. I wonder where it's made. And he said, yeah, no problem. He took off the hat and handed it to me. And I looked and I went, surprise, surprise, made in China. And he goes, well, I don't care about that as long as it's not made in the US. And it's like, China just imposed 100% tariffs on our agricultural products. So, it's good to give that we're helping the Chinese, and we don't want to, we're getting our long johns into knots over the U.S. wanting to promote and protect its own industries and its own manufacturing sector and build up its economy. I'm telling you, things are going to get bad. And right now, there are attack ads running from the Liberal Party attacking Pierre Poilievre, and they're very effective. They are very effective on stupid Canadians. And writ large, Canadians are dumber than a second coat of paint. What they have done in these ads is they've taken small little snippets of Donald Trump saying two or three words, fake news, and then they go to Pierre Poilievre in the House of Commons saying fake news, and they do this repeatedly. They just take little snippets of Trump saying something, and then Pierre Poilievre either saying the exact same words or very similar, and no context around it. And it'll be very effective. And they're running these ads. I had to go online to find them because I do not have a television subscription. In the house, we do not have satellite or cable. So I don't watch mainstream programming, except I interact with it. If there's something I want to see, I search it out on a station like YouTube, where I am. I'm going to read what Mayer is writing. He's writing that it is his real name, and he's India heritage, and wonderful. I was just talking to a guy at work who is Gujarati, and he was amazed to see that this old white Canadian knows where Gujarat is. And my own wife is Tamil, so God bless her. Uh, and Mayer is further saying that he likes Trump, and that he is mostly right on things. And I think, most conservative minded Canadians, I find, are capable of differentiating between Trump, the individual, and Trump and his policies. And myself, I comment now, I have a frequent contributor to this station who goes by the username Koj Malik. And she asked me that, how do you, as a professing Christian, because I am a professing Christian, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. And she says, how can you, as a professing Christian, support or be in, have any affinity towards Donald Trump? And I say, I don't, it's not the man, it's his policies. I like a lot of his policies. I like the fact that Donald Trump knows the difference between a man and a woman. Mark Carney does not. But this isn't about this isn't about Trump and Carney. This is about Carney and Pierre Poilievre. And right now, Canadians are being conditioned, programmed, told to hate Donald Trump, hate him. And by and Canadians, we're Pavlovian dogs. You ring the bell, we salivate. You tell us to hate Donald Trump, and 90%, 80, 90% of the population, yes, sir, oh, I hate Donald Trump, just like you told me. And so first they get Canadians to be all up in arms about Donald Trump, and then they very simply equate Trump and Poilievre. They link the two together. The Liberals are doing it very well with effective attack ads. Don't worry. How are we going to combat this? How are conservative-minded Canadians going to combat this? My little YouTube station with 1,300 or whatever, no, 1,100 subscribers. Even in the YouTube world, I'm a guppy. Okay, I'm a clownfish, yeah, I'm a neon. I'm a very small player in the media sphere, but every single one of us has our sphere of influence. But before I go into it, I'm going to read what's being said. Mayor is writing that he's really tired of me and everyone else bashing Canadians. We are not asleep. We are not dumb. We are neutered. RCMP is seen as scary and fearful by most first generation Canadians. Mayor, fair enough. I make a point on my station frequently, and it is this: the media is there to drive an emotional reaction into Canadians. They want to get you emotional about things. They want to get you hating. They want to get you scared. They want to get you into an emotional state. And the reason they want to get Canadians into an emotional state is because when we become emotional, when we're angry, scared, waving the flag, spine tingling, winning the Four Nations Cup or whatever they called it. When you can get someone into an emotional state, what happens is the frontal lobes of the brain, where our thinking takes place, critical thinking, our higher thought process, that shuts down, especially fear. Fear will get the higher thought processes to shut down. That's the reason why a drowning person, someone drowning in fear, drowning in the water, and if you throw them a rope that's attached to an anchor, they'll grab it because they don't have time to process. They don't have time to think. They're just scared, and the people who are just scared just react, and they're very easy to manipulate. And the difficulty is in trying to get Canadians out of that fearful state, because when we're out of that fearful state, when we're out of that emotional reaction type state, then our brain, then we can think, then we can process. But that's not what we're going to see from our media. Our media is going to be programming us to hate on our American friends. The US right now wants to impose tariffs on foreign based goods coming into their country so that they can revive things like their steel and aluminum industry. It's a foreign country. We're not the 51st state. That is not our market. If they want to protect their industry, their steel, their aluminum, if they want to build those industries up, my attitude, divorced from emotion, is God bless them. It is a foreign country. We do not have an inherent right to sell our things into a foreign country. It's up to that foreign country. And then we can retaliate if we like. That's our choice. Now, the argument has been made, and it's true, when Trump places 25% tariffs on goods coming into the United States from Canada, what happens is American consumers will see prices go up. They're going to go to buy things sourced in Canada, whether it's maple syrup, whether it's oil coming from us, whatever it happens to be. It's going to cost Americans more because the tariff is paid on the American side of the border. The importer has to write a check and hand it to Washington. You're bringing in $1 million worth of Canadian nickel. Okay, pay the Canadian supplier the $1 million, bring it into the United States, and then write a check for $250,000 and hand that to Washington. That's the tariff. So obviously, it's going to impact prices for anything with nickel in it. It's going to go up by who knows. It's not going to go up exactly 25%, I don't think, because they'll be able to bury some of those costs and absorb some of those costs, but there's going to be inflation in the United States of America. Canadians, by retaliating and placing our own tariffs on American goods coming into our country, that means we get to have inflation too. So by having retaliatory um, tariffs, it's like Mark Carney and everyone advocating for them saying, oh, Americans are going to have inflation. We want more inflation too. We're not paying enough. Let's make things more expensive for Canadians. Let's retaliate. And that's what we're doing. And I'm here to tell you it is going to be very bad. I think there is a window, there's a possibility that cooler heads may prevail, that this might be a negotiating ploy on Trump's part. I don't think it is, but that's possible. And that we'll get to that April 2nd date when these widespread tariffs are supposed to come into effect. And at that point, perhaps things calm down, but we'll find out. Um, Anyway, Mayor is really filling up the chat, and I appreciate it. You need to stop this dumber than a coat of paint rhetoric. Fair enough. I like criticism, by the way, Mayor. And and it turns out Mayor is Gujarati, which there are a lot. India has lots of little. You got Punjab, you got Goa, you got Bangalore, you got all these Gujarat. I don't know all the regions. I've never been to India. Mayor's writing, Trudonkey used the trucker protest as a way to show a use of force, but Elon knows how to play the game. Light is the idea cleanser. Oh, yeah. The best disinfectant is sunlight. Amen. I like that. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Evil festers in the dark. And that's why Trudeau, in my opinion, invoked what used to be called the War Measures Act. I think its new name that it was given a number of years ago is the Emergency Measures Act. And it was under the Emergency Measures Act. That's what allowed Trudeau to tell the banks to suspend the accounts, freeze the bank accounts of hardworking Canadians. Can you imagine that? That's the kind of thing you would expect to see in a Soviet era style Russian, dictatorship, not in a free and democratic society that follows the rule of law, where, when that mounted police officer trampled a native woman who actually lives not far from me, trampled her walking with a walker, and she gets run over by a horse during that trucker convoy protest. I had so many friends who went down to it. I myself did not. I was on the overpass with a Canadian flag and a sign that said no more lockdowns. I did not go along with the COVID stuff um, at all. I'm not jabbed and I'm fine. I'm healthy. If I had been driven into the state of fear that so many were afraid, and I would have gotten the jab, but it's a part of my Christian faith is we're not to live in a state of fear. The Bible says 365 times, fear not. Fear is the language of the enemy. When you're in a fearful state, you're easy to manipulate, easy to control. Why cannot Canada's parliamentarians are not allowed to see the contracts that our own government signed with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna? Not allowed to see the contracts unless they first signed a non-disclosure agreement putting a padlock on their mouths so that they can never disclose what it is in those contracts. What's in those contracts that it requires a non-disclosure agreement so that they're kept under wraps in the dark where evil loves to lurk. Echoing Gujarat's statement about sunlight being the best disinfectant. Don't want sunlight, not in those contracts. What do we got? And Mayor is saying that I need to, fair enough. Well, the thing is, it is a genuine Mayor. I hear where you're coming from, but it is a genuinely held opinion that Canadians and Americans and Europeans, humanity in general, that we're easy to manipulate because it's easy to drive us into states of fear. And you can get people to believe absolute heinous, horrible lies when they are afraid. In Germany in the 1930s, the population writ large, big, huge, massive chunk of the population, was made to believe that people who were Jewish were an inferior race and that they spread diseases like typhus. And they proved it because Germany had something called the Kaiser Wilhelm School of Eugenics, Anthropology, and Genetics. And the institute, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute says, and anyone who dared to contradict that in 1930s Germany would be gaslit. Oh, so you know better than the experts at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Yeah, you're Dummkopf. I'm smart. I listen to the experts. People are, you put an authoritative label on things, and people and that's just humanity writ large. I mean, Germany, highly advanced, highly intellectual society, and look what they were led to. Anyway, going on. CW is writing Team Carney and a bunch of Canadian flags. Then why did he send while he was director of Brookfield, why did he send Canadian jobs and Canadian business down to New York City if he's Mr. Canada flag? The guy was living in Britain. He was living in New York City for the last 4 or 5 years. He's been an advisor to Justin Trudeau as we've been going off this cliff with carbon taxing, driving up the cost of everything. And that's another point that conservatives are going to have to get adept at talking about is climate change, anthropogenic climate change. Anthropogenic meaning human caused. Do humans have a significant impact on climate? Significant impact. I'm not going to suggest that Canadians have no, or rather, humanity writ large, globally, that human beings have zero impact on global climate patterns. No, I'm not going to say that. But is it significant? There have been climactic cycles of warming and cooling that have gone on throughout all of history, even before humans. We had around the year 1950, somewhere around there. Look into it. It's called the medieval warming period. Lasted somewhere around 400 years. Planet got very warm in the northern hemisphere. The ice sheets on Greenland rolled back. That's why the Vikings named it Greenland, because they said, wow, look, a green land, global warming. So they went and they established settlements. Those settlements lasted 200 to 300 years. And then that medieval warming period ended. And we entered a period referred to as the Little Ice Age, which lasted sometime from around 1400 until sometime around 1800. And there were cataclysmic weather events in the northern hemisphere then as well, and they're recorded in history. Hailstorms that killed cattle and even human beings, anyone who was unsheltered, killed. And then in and around 1800, which, in and around the time that the Industrial Revolution started, then we entered the current period of another warming trend. So we had about a 400-year period of warming, followed by about a 400-year period of cooling. Now we're in another warming period. If it lasts another 400 years, like the previous two trends, well, then we got another 200 years or so, I guess, from 1800 till 2200. So we got 175 years left in this trend. To what degree is that human impacted? And Mark Carney, with his educational background, he went to Harvard, he went to Oxford. I don't know exactly, economics or supply chain management. I don't know exactly what his degrees are in. I have no qualms in saying he's a very intelligent guy and he's highly qualified in the financial space, sure. But how in the heck does that qualify him to wade through the competing narratives on human impact on climate change? Just because there's one predominating narrative doesn't mean it's right. The scientific predominating narrative in 2020 was that SARS-CoV-2 originated in a wet market in Wuhan, China, that a bat and a human interacted, and a stressed out bat scratched or bit a human being, and the SARS-CoV-2 virus jumped from a bat to a human. And that was the consensus view. Nature magazine wrote an article on it. I read it. I believed it. Why wouldn't I? It turns out it was a crock of shit. It didn't jump from a bat to a human. The reason we know that is because they've looked in bat reservoirs. They've gone to bat populations all over the world trying to find the bat reservoir is what it's referred to, the originating source, and they can't because it's not there. And so they made up a news story, and they said, well, maybe it jumped from a bat to a raccoon dog. You can look into this, it's true. They said maybe it jumped from a rabbit from a bat to a raccoon dog and then to a human. All right, we'll test the raccoon dog populations and see if we can find a reservoir there. Well, we're not going to do that. We came up dry and we looked like idiots about and then we had the whole 6 feet crap that Anthony Fauci said. And you can go on now, check it out. It's in USA Today and CNN, ABC, CBS. Even the mainstream acknowledges. Fauci was forced to acknowledge that what evidence was there to support your social distancing, and he came out. There was no science behind it. Hold it out of you know where. That was the science of the COVID era. And it's the same thing with climate change. It's the same thing. Cause and effect is faulty reasoning. Just because we entered a warming trend coincidentally with the rise of industrialization does not necessarily mean that industrialization has caused climate change. What caused the medieval warming period then? How did we have a warming period of 400 years when Iceland's ice sheets rolled back to such a degree that the Vikings were able to establish permanent settlements? What caused that climate change? Well, that one was natural. Okay, so what you're saying is climactic cycles of warming and cooling occur naturally. Yeah, but not this one. And there are other voices out there, highly accredited voices. The former chair for meteorology and climate studies at MIT and Harvard, and his name is Linston. I'm not sure exactly how to spell it, but I've seen interviews with him. And he is a skeptic on saying, now, the thing is, they say 90%, there's 90%, 97% consensus in the scientific community that humans cause climate change. Okay. What degree? Some believe it's incredibly small. Some think it's significant. They all agree that we have some impact, but there are many climate experts who think our impact, human activity, has a very minimal impact, but it's still an impact. So you can still correctly say 97% of climatologists agree that human activity affects the climate. Yeah, these guys say only that little bit. Not everyone is Chicken Little in the field of climate science, but not all of them get money. I'm catching up with you, Maher, where you write, we are not actually free and democratic, to be honest. We are slaves of a king, and Trudster milked it. Fair comment. What we should do is gather a bunch of top alternative media and form a party. Lead the charge, Gordon. Many will join. No. I'm not interested in. I have thought about throwing my hat into the political ring, but if I was to do so, I would run as a member of the Christian Heritage Party. And I'm realistic enough to recognize that anyone running for the CHP, Christian Heritage Party, has a snowball's chance in the nether regions of ever getting elected. At the same time, I have toyed with the idea, and I'll never say never. What's up? Hank Holiday is a regular subscriber to the channel. He's all the way down in the great state of Texas. I love my American friends, and I don't hate Donald Trump. And does that make me a bad Canadian? According to some, it does. But I don't operate the way most Canadians do. When most Canadians were hunkering in their bunkers, afraid of the air, I was going out and gathering in the hundreds with people. And I've been talking about this on my channel since late 2020. Late 2020 is when I first started to do some videos. Just, and it wasn't until the trucker convoy in 2022 that I started to do more regular videos. And I've been ramping up. And now I'm doing several a week. Sometimes I'll go 4 or 5 days in a row and do one before taking a night off. It depends on the news cycle. It depends on what's happening in the world. Mayor, and again, I won't say the last name because he's saying, we are not dumb. We are we are kind and good-hearted. Evil will always find a way to penetrate and then will make you believe you are dumb and should follow, not lead. China doesn't have religion. I don't know enough about China, to be fair. Um, I know that that's a communist country, and Karl Marx, famously wrote that religion is the opiate of the masses. And I know that they are persecuting Christians in China, and I know as well the Uyghurs, I think, is the name of the Muslim minority that lives within the borders of China, People's Republic of, and they've been persecuted horribly. But at the same time, I wonder, are there not Buddhists in, but then again, look at Tibet, so probably not. Anyway, uh, Mayor is writing that Mao, during his, they called it the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, Mao deleted religion for a reason so they could take over. Well, and again, when I talk about my Christian faith and the fact that the Bible says 365 times, fear not, and there's a reason for that. And right now, when you tune into the nightly news, and I was reading a CBC News article which was highlighting the stress and panic and fear among Canadians. It's like what we saw during the COVID era. We saw them shining a bright spotlight on stories that centered on people who were afraid. Marie's husband just went into the hospital and he's been put on a ventilator, and oh my God, people got very scared. And fear as I say, is an easy way. It's great to manipulate. CBC News Edmonton, something I mention frequently on my station. CBC News Edmonton, I forget what year, I think it was 2021. They were giving their nightly newscast, and when they did their bit reporting on the COVID numbers and all that stuff, on the backdrop, green screen, whatever, they had a picture. And the picture was of a patient in an ICU hooked up to a ventilator. And then they, did their reporting on COVID. Edmonton saw X number of new cases and da da da, so many in ICU, da da da. And they gave the numbers and did their reporting without ever disclosing the fact that the image that they were displaying on the screen was actually not a patient. It was a mannequin. It was only thanks to very observant, critically thinking Canadian consumers of the news. They did screen captures and they looked and they saw that's not a human being, that's a mannequin. CBC News is engaging in unethical journalism. And proof that they engaged in unethical journalism is the fact that the director of CBC News Edmonton came out with a public apology saying, we made a mistake. It was an error in judgment. And I'm here to say, no, it was not an error or a mistake. It was done intentionally, unless No one at CBC News Edmonton ever took Journalistic Ethics 101 because ethically, to do that, they can do that ethically. They can show that image so long as they disclose the following image that we are displaying behind us depicts a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator in an ICU. And this is not a real person. This is to give viewers an impression of what a patient might look like or would look like. However, this is not a patient. This is a mannequin. If they had done that, Bob's your uncle. They're acting in an ethical manner. They didn't. So the director of CBC News Edmonton was forced to issue a public apology. We made a mistake. It was an error in judgment. Garbage. Was done intentionally. It served the purpose. It drove fear. Oh, did you see that on the news? A guy in a bed. I don't want that to be me. Great way to drive fear, which makes people easy to manipulate and control. Anyway, where are we? Okay. Mayor is writing that what looks like gullible is actually the patient, kind side of Christ, which we are meant to keep safe. What we aren't shown is how to stay steadfast in the face of evil, but the Bible shows. Amen. You know, it's a struggle. There's a line that I love, and it's this: if the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it. We're climbing a mountain, and it's hard, and it's meant to be hard because the destination is meaningful. And if it wasn't difficult, the meaning wouldn't be there. That's If the mountain was smooth, we couldn't climb it. And it's not meant to be easy. There's a tendency I find, especially among younger people, to think that, well, if God is all knowing, all seeing, all wise, all this, all that, everything, that then he would just manifest it simply and it would be easy and you would know automatically. And it's that, and then I go back to the line, well, if the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it, then it can't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is easy going on. Mayor is writing hate, intolerance, giving up, blame, racism, DEI. These are all games of the evildoer. I'm not a fan of DEI at all, but at the same time, I do recognize that racism exists. Absolutely, 100%. There are. I have a neighbor who is Archie Bunker. He's a Canadian version of Archie Bunker. He would watch All in the Family and not laugh. That's a reference. You got to be, 50s, 60s or older to get that reference. But Mayor is further writing, when it comes up in us, we must understand to do the opposite. That sounds like George Costanza on Seinfeld. Do the opposite. The healthy truth is writing, climate change is just weather on Earth. It's been happening since the dawn of time. Amen. So you're in agreement with me. But I bring up this point. You can what's beautiful about the world we live in now. What's beautiful and horrific at the same time. People have outsourced their brains to their handheld devices. I am such a dinosaur. I don't even own a cell phone. It was about 2, 3 years ago. I finally canceled it. Said I'm done with it. And even at that point, all I had was an old, very old, 10-plus-year-old Samsung S3. I don't know, what are they on, the S10 now? Mine was an old S3, and I'm done with it. And so, but with people having one of these, if you get into conversation with them and you're talking about Mark Carney, and you have to remember, Mark Carney was a senior advisor at the UN pushing the climate change narrative, and he's all behind all these economy destroying carbon taxes and such, and he wants to wipe out the Canadian steel industry by imposing even more tariffs. The elephant in the room for me is China. There is a looming conflict coming. I do believe that Donald Trump is gearing the United States. I think Donald Trump recognizes that eventually things are going to come to a head between the United States and China. China is very much the power on the rise, militarily and economically. And the United States Their economy is growing, but it's growing at a very slow pace when compared to China. And I don't know exactly what year, but it's long been projected that sometime within the next 10 years or so, that the Chinese economy will surpass the US economy. And they're building up their military like crazy. They're building aircraft carriers, they're building weapons en masse. And is it to no purpose, or are we going to see an eventual showdown between they've got this, they call it the Belt Road Initiative, where China's been going into Africa, they've been going into Greenland, they've been going and securing mineral rights all around the world, mineral and resource rights. And they're looking to become the economic driver of the world. And this is a communist system. And do you want to live in communism? Forget freedom of speech. Freedom of speech in communism is gone. All those who cherish freedom, liberals are typically, liberals used to be the champions of free speech. Now sadly we have liberals often wanting to clamp down on free speech. Only certain free speech, so long as you say the approved things, that's okay. But if you're opposed to DEI, well, that's hateful. We're going to take away your right to express honest opinions on your opposition to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which some say means did not earn it. The Trudeau government, where they had a piece of legislation, I think it's Bill 163, I may have the number wrong. They refer to it as the Online Harms Bill. They were going to empower a committee, an unelected committee, to oversee hate speech on the internet. And that sounds good. Online harms. Who wants harm on the internet? But who gets to decide what's harmful and what's not? Someone gets hurt feelings over something said or written on the internet, and then they go and they complain to this unelected body, and then that could bring legal ramifications on someone from exercising what many think to be an inherent and unalienable right to speak your mind, not to advocate killing or harm to others. But I stand firmly on the ground that says there are two genders. There's male and female. Gender is binary. When the baby is born, the doctor holds the baby up. They look below the equator. If they see a penis, they say you've had a boy. If they see a vagina, they say you've had a girl. Those are the only two choices. Anyway, Mayor is writing, do it. It will work. You will be shocked. What does the Bible say about being outnumbered? Good point. Mayor, blessings, brother. Mayor is bringing up the fact that, God only needs a remnant. Look at the story of Gideon. I can't remember if that's in Judges or Chronicles. It's in one of the early books of the Bible. Gideon was going up against the enemies of the Israelites, and he gathered an army. And I forget the story in minute detail, but at first it was going to be an army of 30,000, and God said, "I don't need 30,000. Say anyone who doesn't want to fight, tell them to go home. Anyone who's got wife and kids and they're worried, tell them to go home." So then that reduced it down to about 10,000. And God said, I don't need 10,000. Have everyone go down to the river and have them drink. And those that get down on all fours and lap it up like a dog, send them home. Only grab those who grab it out of their hands. And I forget all the full story, but eventually Gideon got down to about 300, going up against thousands of Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, I forget, Somite, and defeated them. And God did that as a means to show that he doesn't need the biggest army. God only needs a remnant. So excellent point, Mayor. I want to give it a try. Jabanputra. Jabanputra. If I say it fast, it might work. What does the Bible say about being outnumbered? We are being shown how in Israel versus Iran, or us versus China. Well, my Christian faith informs me that that we're heading to tumultuous times. I'm not. I am an evangelical. Anyone who spreads the gospel good news is an evangelical. But I'm not of the stripe to say I know exactly what every prophecy means and look at Daniel and these are the, so many weeks of Daniel and this is, what's happening in Revelation and uh, Ezekiel 38, 39, the war of Gog and Magog, and this one's Gog and that this is Gog and Magog, and this is, that one and this one. And, I look at it from 100 miles up and I say, all right, we're heading to a bad time. We're heading to a time of conflict. We're heading to a time of war. The world's nations are going, I believe the world's nations are, Israel is going to be standing alone and is going to be surrounded. Who will be involved? Turkey, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. Those are good candidates in my mind, but I don't claim to know. What did Mayor just write? He's saying that I said it correct, by the way. Heading into difficult times is exactly the setup we need. Amen. God, you're amazing. Yeah, and I think about this all the time, and it's good to have someone like yourself here to remind me when the Israelites fled Egypt, when Moses led them out of bondage. Even if you haven't read the Bible, you've probably seen the depiction in that famous movie, The Ten Commandments, where God directed them to a place where there was no escape. Their backs were to the sea. And in the movie version, with Yul Brynner playing the role of Pharaoh, he looked upon the Hebrews all encamped against the Red Sea, or if you like, the Sea of Reeds. It depends on your interpretation of Yam Suf. And he said, the God of the Hebrews is a poor general to leave his people with no retreat. And God drives us into places where we have to rely on him. Amen, brother. I love it. And do you mind me asking, Mayor, what part of Canada you're in? I myself am in small town Brighton, Ontario, which incidentally has I won't say significant, but a noticeable population of Gujaratis. Number of businesses in town have been started or are run by Gujarati. So I need to learn a little of the language. I like to learn how to say hello or please or thank you. I can say it in Chinese, you know. Chinese, it's ni hao is hi, and xie xie is thank you, and bokuchi is you're welcome. In Korean, it's kamsahamnida is thank you, and chamaneo is you're welcome, and annyeonghaseyo is greetings. Give me, German, French, Italian. Uh, French I speak. I'm more than functionally bilingual. I lived in Quebec for years, and Mayor is in Vancouver. Just at the moment we want to give up is when we have to. Oh, I like two thoughts here. Lives in Vancouver, and getting back to the biblical point. Just at the moment we want to give up. That is when we have to decide light or dark. That is the test. Wonderful having you here. Eat me. Is right. Eat me is she is from Montreal, and she's like, holy moly, you're live again. I did a live earlier. I was talking about the streaming show The Chosen, but I just felt it incumbent with everything that's going on. And I know that conservatives, it's going to be a hard time to defeat Mark Carney, because the media machine is going to be going full bore. And they're going to have a lot of momentum. They've had the spotlight on them in a largely positive fashion for the last week or so with their convention and the voting and installing Mark Carney. And this is going to continue. They're going to be dominating the news cycle because now Trudeau is going to, and Carney will go to the Governor General, and Carney will be sworn in. So that's a big news event. Carney is now the Prime Minister of Canada. I think you'll wait a few days, milk that coverage of him being the new prime minister. And then he'll go a few days later, maybe a week or so, back to the governor general. He'll ask to have parliament formally dissolved because they're not even sitting right now, and for the purposes of having a general election. So he's going to be going to the polls with the Liberals having a lot of wind in their sails. They were down around 18, 19, 20% when Trudeau was leading the party. Now they're punching up in around 30. And when the polls come out in the wake of the leadership race and everything, I think we're going to see that the conservatives and liberals are running neck and neck, and they're going to say Mark Carney has revived liberal fortunes. They were down at around 20. Now they're punching up around 35, 36, neck and neck with the conservatives. Obviously, the liberals have the wind in their sails. And it's just part of human nature for people to, want to get on board. Everyone seems to be going this way. It's got to be good. Anyway, I'm just going to read up and then I'm going to say goodnight. So I read Eat Me. Mayor is writing, is going to be easy to defeat Carney. Do not let evil believe it's stronger than it is. I'm ex-military, and one of the things we're told, and not just in militaristic terms, never underestimate your opponent. Better to overestimate your opponent. And what I'm going to suggest is that conservative-minded Canadians, that we need to get our talking points down. The fact that Mark Carney took Canadian jobs and transported them down to the United States, we've got to highlight the heck out of that. And when he was board of director on the board, chairman of the board at Brookfield Proper Asset, BAM is the acronym, BAM, Brookfield Asset Management Company Corporation. They are a property development, property management company. I thought for Brookfield, I used to work in downtown Toronto at a Cadillac Fairview company, a company that was partially owned by Cadillac Fairview, and Cadillac Fairview and Brookfield were two of the biggest property development, property asset management companies in Canada. But Brookfield said, well, with Mark Carney at the helm, they said, "Oh, we're sending Canadian jobs down to the U.S." So you got to remember that. Number two, you got to remember he's not the one who steered Canadians through the great financial crisis. Stephen Harper did that, and the Canada's Banking Act did that. You got to be ready to combat the climate change narrative and to remind people that this is why housing costs have doubled. This is why the cost of living is why things are so damn expensive. Canadians are, food banks are having trouble keeping up now. You got to get your talking points in order. You got to talk about the fact that Mark Carney got, for the last 10, 15 years, he's been living in England. He's been living in New York City. I suspect the reason he had Brookfield move down to New York is because if things don't work out for him politically, that's where he'll end up. He probably likes New York. He left the Bank of England and went and became an advisor at the UN to push the climate change narrative. Let me read the last few. Mayor saying we need a light worker for next PM. PP may be it, Pierre Poilievre. Not sure yet. Seems to be. We must support him, not run in fear. Eat Me is saying it's going to be a dirty war. Carney can't debate, even in French. His French is poor, although I notice it has improved. Carney is sharp. And comme c'est, Eat Me, je parle français, mais ma français, c'est loin de parfait. My French is far from perfect. But good enough. Mayor is saying, careful the language, friend. We manifest in sound and thought. Appreciate it. Mayor, I appreciate you coming on the stream. Sharunian, with a new name yet again. And there's always some Sharunian changes his name frequently. Cannot trust those frauds in Parliament Hill. Yeah, at the end of the day, and I think Mayor and others, Eat Me, I think all of us are in agreement that Pierre Poilievre is the best choice given the current landscape. but he'll have to prove himself if he actually wins. Right now, if the vote was to be held today, I think it's pretty much a coin flip between whether or not it would be a liberal or a conservative minority. But the thing is, a few weeks in politics is a lifetime. So we'll see what happens as things play out. The media is doing a bit of a love in with Mark Carney right now. I could read you, I should, just for fun. A lot of Canadians say, well, I want to get, what are they saying about Mark Carney in the United States? And let me see if I can find I saved an article. And where did it go? A CNN article on, uh, huh, I did save it. And it doesn't appear to be showing up. However, there, I found it. Sorry for the delay. Who is Mark Carney? The crisis handling former central bank governor turned Canada's next leader. And this was written on Monday. So within the last 24 hours. Canada's next leader is a career in finance where he steered governments through major global crises and periods of upheaval. Experience he's hoping to now leverage as he prepares to go. It's an unorthodox background that could also potentially stand Carney in good stead as Canada seeks to counter a looming economic confrontation with its giant southern neighbor, US Trump's trade war. Carney was elected Sunday to lead Canada's Liberal Party into the next federal election sometime this year. They write later this year. While he has never run for elected office before, rumors have swirled for years about it and if and when he might foray into politics. Speaking Monday to reporters, he added that the transition between Trudeau's premiership and his would be seamless and quick, but did not give an exact date when he would take office. I'll stop reading there and I'll put it up in the live chat if anyone cares to read the whole thing. It's it's a glowing piece. Carney is getting very positive press coverage, and it's going to be very difficult to defeat him. Neil Moreau saying Mark Carney equals non-transparent, unelected, unacceptable, personal financial agenda, Trudeau WF member clone. And that's another thing that we have to sell as conservative minded Canadians to people when we're talking to our friends, our family, our relatives, our colleagues, everyone. Uh, Carney has been advising Trudeau for the last 4 or 5 years as they've been. So if you don't like the policies of the Trudeau Liberals, well, Mark Carney is Trudeau 2.0. It's policy, not personality. The thing is, a lot of people do vote on personality. Canadians, it is said often that we don't elect government so much as we kick them out. It wasn't that we were thrilled with the idea of Justin Trudeau. Canadians were just tired of Stephen Harper. So they changed. They weren't embracing Trudeau, they were tired of Harper. Now, what's happened though is Canadians were fed up with Trudeau. There was a chance they could have lost official party status if he stayed on. And so Trudeau is gone. So now the urgency to he's gone. And so the personality side of it, now we have to pick someone new. And Mark Carney is seen as someone new, or Pierre Poilievre. We got two new choices now. That's the way a lot of people are going to approach this. They're going to say, well, I wanted to see Brookfield Asset Management, what? He moved Canadian jobs to the United States? Yeah. Take out your phone, check it out. Type it in, Carney, Brookfield, New York City. And they'll read the article and, and then, read what he said about steel. He said Canadians don't use steel. We don't need it. Let's destroy our steel industry. Canadians don't use steel. He said it a few months back. Think he regrets it now, obviously. You drive a car, he stands there in front of a hockey net, it's probably made of steel, probably some steel components to it. Whatever. Mayor saying, have a good night. All right. And I do group streams, and I would love to have you on. So I use streaming software called StreamYard. I don't use it all the time, but when I do, I will definitely, if you and this applies to everyone, subscribe to my channel, please, if you like. You don't have to. But if you like what I'm saying, if you want to contribute in the live chat, subscribe. You'll be notified. You hit the bell, you get notified when my videos are going live. I usually do them live, unscripted, top of my head, old 58-year-old, uh, Canadian born, spent 8, 9 years, well, just short of 10 years, 9+ years growing up in New York, New Jersey, Oregon. So I have something of a different perspective than a lot of people. Left the Canadian Armed Forces communication branch. I was in the Royal Canadian Corps of Signals. SIGOP was the term, signals operator, SIGOP. I talked on the radio. I worked in communication centers, that kind of thing. And sharing my thoughts, my views, my opinions on all manner of things, and always enjoy engagement, lively discussion. I like countering point of views. Mayor put my feet to the fire a little bit. Doesn't like, I have, and which is something I appreciate. I love criticism. Amy saying you look tensed. Well, probably not so much now. When I get, I've relaxed a bit, but I was earlier. Uh, and Sharunya saying that I still use, not since I got my new laptop, but my old laptop, it was Windows 7. Um, yeah, it is now Windows 11. I am up to date. And there's that article. All right. I'm going to end it off an hour, almost an hour and a half long. I like to end my videos with a blessing from the Bible. Mayor, I don't know if you've been on my stream before. If you haven't, the words will be familiar to you. I imagine you sound quite biblically dialed in. It's from the book of Numbers. End of chapter 6, starting in verse 24, a blessing that Moses was given by God to give to Aaron. And Aaron spoke this over God's covenant chosen people. And the blessing is, the Lord bless and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And the point I like to make at the end of these, and you see, I had me saying that I looked all tensed up. This is where you find your peace, ultimately, because he has this. Get into relationship and leveraging off the video I just did earlier this evening or yesterday. If you don't know Christ, if you don't know Christ at all, I would suggest going onto YouTube here and watching the first episode of season 1 of The Chosen as an introduction. I realize that getting into the Bible, that can be difficult. We live in a world where technology is how people interact with the world. And the thing that Christians will often say, Jesus will meet you where you're at. And if you're at a space where you want to interact with something digitally and you want to see a video on it, I highly recommend watching The Chosen and just take it in. And if that spurs you on from there to do further investigation, amen. But I'll end it there. Good night. God bless. And again, thank you for the thumbs up that I've gotten already. And if anyone watching wants to subscribe who has not, please do. And we'll talk to you all in a few nights. I'll read the last few. Eat Me's writing that God is the path to walk on. Amen. Uh, and Mayor has never gone to church, never read the Bible. Interesting. You seem to know it well. That he's tried all religions, and he is a theist, not to be confused with an atheist. Someone who is moral has a moral code. Someone who is amoral does not have a moral code. Someone who is a theist believes in God, atheist does not. So Mayor believes in God, but anyway, he's writing Islam. In Islam, it says, if you come to me, God, 1 inch, I will come 1 mile, or something of that sort. Just a tiny bit of hope. Okay. And Eat Me is writing, if it is sandy and easy to walk on, it will get harder. All right. Anyway, that's the end of the chats. Um, we'll talk to you very soon. God bless. Night.